In this episode, I want to touch a little bit the theme of plants, especially trees, as we can see them here. Of course, I could go there and talk maybe a whole series about trees and how to get them on the cheap in the scene, because the problem with trees is they have millions of little leaves, and if you just have an image in it, it doesn't look very correct or right, and so you get not really the illusion. To have maybe something here in the scene that works for you is, of course, always a creative challenge to find the solution. And I want to give you a head start here. I can't give you a solution for all cases, of course, but the idea here is for camera projection not to have an ocean of polygons here, of course, which you would get when you use standard trees, 3D trees, which is, of course, by the way, a theme on its own how natural they look. It's a wide variety of quality available in this area. So what I want to do here is, of course, how to create trees that have some kind of 3D and parallax with that, and we can see even movement inside, and we don't have a huge load of polygons in the scene. So the simple answer is, of course, we project them as well. And when we have trees like this one here, it's pretty much just a sphere. But we have to take a look to all of these details here, because this border is very important. And in the moment you render this out and you compose this, when you do that with the light wrap, it looks beautifully. Okay, let's have a look to Photoshop. When we have an image like this, we have first to examine how large it is. And for that, we can go here to the image size. That's 5,500 pixels. It's not less, but it's not really sufficient for HD production. And it's, from my point of view, pretty much critical on the border of everything. It depends, of course. In the moment we move the camera very fast, we get a lot of motion blur, and so we get maybe away with a little bit lower quality. But in the moment we project this, we lose already a little bit, and we have to do, of course, here always the math that we need 1.5 higher than the final frame is. And that is then already even less. So with 5,500 in width, we cannot even use half of the image here in terms of full framing. So from this area to this area is maybe the maximum that we can use. Of course, we can move the camera very fast and then we get away with motion blur, because that takes all the fine little details here away. And to prepare this image, which we will discuss, of course, in detail in 2 episodes later, we have to do several steps. First of all, we need the facade as it is, except when we have already decided what we want to see. I was not clear in this stage how far I want to go, and so I just took the whole thing here apart and painted the facade from this, which works nicely in the vanishing tool. And I wanted to have, and I'll show you that here, this area, because I go higher with the camera, I wanted to have a facade element here instead of that gray stuff. So I put this here already on top of each other. You can see it pretty clearly that when I have used it once, and that was possible here in that area, then I don't need to have this here again in the next layer. So I go layer by layer up to all these details. This facade was important to me, and I have pretty much deleted all the stuff that looks not to the flat facade that is outside, that gives me maybe trouble when I want to project it. This is easy to project, and so I had here already a lot of space to work with. And then I need, of course, a little bit here, that area where when the camera goes up, I want to see this flat wall here, how it gets longer when we look on the top of that. So I needed here, of course, an extension, which is always done with the stamp tool in the vanishing tool. And of course I needed here from this area also, just everything that wasn't there before. This is what we have. This is what I need. So now I can go with the camera higher and I will see here some windows. And if they were there or not, I don't care, because who wants to prove me wrong? And if someone can prove me wrong, who cares really? So this is my artistic freedom that I take here. And then we can go further. I wanted to have, of course, here this picture on the wall. And I had here a billboard. And this time I have painted the shadow directly on it, because here I have all the shadow color, the density, the color, and so on. And the billboard went here. This is done after I have projected everything. So I knew where the projection camera is, put the frame on it, render it out, and bring it back. And then I know exactly here I have to paint and shadow. And last but not least, the trees. And this is pretty much all what I needed here for the trees. I extended them. But first of all, I took here an alpha channel from them. And when you take a look very closely, I used here just that leaf brush in dynamics and everything else to paint practically an alpha channel where the trees is. Very small, bigger, smaller. And if I hadn't told you that, you wouldn't know. Because that's not the main part where you have your attention when you look to a camera projection. And of course, I wanted to have here that building, so I have a nice soft edge instead of a 3D object hard edge, so to say. So this is pretty much all. And as you can see, I have painted here even the pole away, because I don't want you to have it in a scene. It doesn't support really the 3D effects, so you don't get really a lot of mileage out of this pole, and it's not really a nice element. The green by itself is nicer. And now you might say, oh, I see some repetition here in it. Okay, that's from one point of view, and when we project this and move the camera, this will be not possible. Have you noticed it when I showed you the preview? Nope, I think no. And that's exactly the point, because the billboard is finally the one that will have the most motion in it by itself, and everything that moves or when the light or the brightness values change will have the most attention from the audience in most cases, of course. If you are really 100% only in trees and don't have a lot to do with the music video, then, or with the band, then the trees might be your attention. But standard is where the movement is, where the brightness change, there will be your attention. And that's the cinematography 101 in a nutshell. And so do not put too much attention to areas that get vanished and eaten up by motion blur on the end anyway. So let's have a look to Cinema 4D. In Cinema 4D, I want to start, of course, with a view that you wouldn't give away to the audience normally. And here you can see my normal discussion about the projection and the photography direction or point of view, that should be pretty similar. And then we see here a little bit of the green that I haven't eliminated, because I thought, oh, I don't go that deep with the camera anyway. And this is the whole tree here. And I wanted to show that while it is rendered. And I have used here 2 layers, and I have inside of each layer some little holes in it. So I see movement in terms of parallax between these guys here, which is very important to create the illusion of that. And you see I have an alpha channel here around these guys, and when I render this, I see one time this more like a twig thingy, and this here is more like just a leaf coat in this way. So 2 different areas, and with the camera movement I get then this parallax. There's a little bit inside, not too much, because I don't want to have the attention of the audience in a tree. I want just to give enough to make it believable. And that's the whole key always. Just go as far as you need. And when you go over the top and have your attention only to the trees and not so much to the details, to anything else, your scene will maybe suffer. So we have another tree here, of course, in the scene, and that was a very small one. And I go to this here just in a second. I use here, by the way, the shortcut sometimes, and sometimes here the little icons. I'm so used to use any option here. For tutorials, I'm supposed to use these guys here because it's more visible, but 1, 2, 3 is for move, for rotation and scale, or zoom. And so I use this here. And this is here just one area of a sphere. I have cut everything away that I didn't need. And the truth was, of course, based on the whole project here, on the big building here, I could easily create my camera position, as we have discussed this before. And based on some assumption, I could then place this roundish object here in the right position. I have placed here, of course, also some lamp poles. I have put one lamp pole away, but I put 3D objects here in the scene because that gives me a little bit more of a 3D effect. And when I see them on the other street side or behind the building, I get a better idea about the scale of the whole thing. And as you can see, I have recreated the whole billboard holder here in this case, and have eliminated the picture that I had before. And this billboard here, and I render this so you can see a little bit more than just black, because the black is here from the reflection that I have integrated in the windows. And you see here the shadow works nicely at the moment. And when you compare this with this shadow, the density is pretty much the same here. Of course, you might adjust this or not. This has here not so much reflection from anything else than that from the street here, and where the tree has maybe some holes and so on. Okay, that's pretty much all. And you can see here on the roof, and I move this here to the side, the projection, because I didn't want to see anything from the roof itself. That projection goes just through, but I could see this area here. Okay, that's all not tree. So I want to go back to the QuickTime and let's run this one time back and forth so you can see here how it works. And it's a little bit stuttery. Sorry for that. It should work nicely, but with screen capture on and full frame here, that's a little bit too much. So I like to do this manually. But you see here, it works pretty nice. It gives no difference here in terms of detail or whatever. It goes seamless. And I like the little seam here. And did you notice here really that I have used the brush with the leaf on it and random and dynamics? I don't get this. And it's very fast to do that. And you see here that hole on the left side. Those little things are very important because they give me a little bit light, and in the moment I see there's a change, I believe it. And when I have bought it, my attention goes immediately to something else. And then my attention is maybe on the lights here or on the billboards and on that spot here. And you can see here my facade, everything is just integrated. And that's just a test camera. By the way, in the background I have just an image. I think you have seen this and that needs not more attention. I wanted to have the city building here from LA in the background, of course. That perspective wouldn't be possible normally with a standard camera, of course. And last but not least, have an eye on a reflection in the window, just to give you that hint as well. And when you have the trees here, and the trees would be reflected in the windows, you have to have an eye on it, that the round object where you project it on is sufficient for that view here. I don't have that here, but reflection is in the window and it moves here nicely. Also just based on an image far away. That's all. I hope these little hints could give you some ideas and you will hopefully expand on these. And I hope I see you in the next episode. Thanks for listening.